Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
Stewart, the Supreme Court of Canada, in a 9-0 unanimous decision that only took 30 minutes, said BC did not have a case about deciding what kind of materials can go down the Trans Mountain pipeline from roughly Edmonton to Burnaby. What's your opinion of this court ruling? Was it a given?
It was a given. They were already skunked in the BC courts. They took it to Ottawa. Basically the BC government, political side, made a promise to the U.S. environmentalists that they would press this case. It was an election commitment, so they're doing their bit to fulfill the promise. Pretty much all the boxes are ticked off right now, and finally, this beneficial project, the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, that's needed to get full value for our non-renewable oil resources in Canada, instead of giving it away at a big discount to the fat cat Americans, we're finally now, because of this court ruling, going to be able to have that, and the First Nations of Canada will benefit.
Right. Now, it should be pointed out the native bands along the pipeline, both the natural gas pipeline in northern BC and the oil pipeline that'll run from Edmonton down to the Vancouver area, the bands on the land that these pipelines will go through, they have voted in favor of the projects, have they not?
Oh, they have. Absolutely. All of them. Yeah. Yeah. It's probably the most broadly supported by Indigenous people project in the history of Canada.
Isn't one of the prime reasons they're in favor of this project is, I'm sure they're being given substantial money to go through their land. It doesn't take up a lot of land to put through a pipeline, and probably most importantly, it will give them jobs and permanent skills.
Well, that's the motivation of a lot of the chiefs that I've spoken to in my travels and interviews. I hear that again and again, that it is the skills. One of the problems with rural youth, whoever they may be, and particularly Indigenous youth, is the barriers to education and employment, especially if they want to stay on the ancestral lands. So, if you're hundreds of kilometers away from the big cities or any cities, what do you do? If you want to stay, keep your languages intact, keep your culture intact, respect your elders, what do you do? The idea that we have from the American environmentalists that we have to stop all development so that people can sit around in the dark and fulfill a romantic vision that some billionaire in California has of how Canadian Indigenous people should live is probably one of the most repellent ideas that is in circulation right now. And it's the Indigenous people everywhere I go who are most, I think, fed up with it. I'm at Roundup, Minerals Roundup this week. I heard some moving song last night at the Northwest Territories. It's the Indigenous people, the women, who are leading the way towards prosperity and having fairness, getting past the wrongs of the past that were a result of how it came to be that the Americas were colonized, but dealing with today's reality and not trying to, play to these funders from the U.S. who, for some perverse reasons, want Canadians to suffer.
Well, couldn't it just be a thinly veiled attempt by U.S. energy companies to counter competition from Canada?
Yeah, I often hear that one said. I have to say, though, it's not really something that I think has proved out as an argument. It sort of stands to reason, because what is the old saying? Who benefits? What's the Latin of that? It's an ancient phrase. Who benefits? Because almost anything you see, any situation in life, you're wondering, hey, what is this thing? I don't quite understand. Well, the first question you ask is who benefits? So who benefits when Canadian hydrocarbons can't get fair value for the benefit of Canadians? Well, Americans benefit. So it's a fair question. But as I say, I haven't actually seen the evidence that this is a real thing. But I think for as long as we have economic interference allowed, despite our trade agreements with the U.S., as long as we allow them to interfere in our economy, we're going to have Canadians suspicious about it. And I think that's a bad thing.
Are pipelines not a lot safer to transport hydrocarbons than rail cars?
Rail's a great way to go. Pipelines are a commodity-specific piece of infrastructure that allow 24/7 continuous movement of the fluids inside of them. So inherently, there's a physical rationale for doing that rather than batch shipping. I think the Canadian railways are probably as safe as they get in spite of the we've all driven through the Rockies. You see the terrain. It's amazing that they do it safely, but they do it incredibly safely. And I think bottlenecks are the big problem right now. How do we ensure that getting our canola, getting our wheat to market on the same railroads as other commodities is able to happen? Because that's essential for our economy. We can't have the farmers sitting with their silos full on the prairies because they can't ship it to the coast. We gotta have a diversification of our infrastructure that allows for things to move.
Do you think that hasn't been pointed out to the politicians? If the railways are clogged with oil tanker cars, there isn't room to move things like wheat or canola and other agricultural products.
Oh, I think they're wise to this. I think there's a degree of caution behind those impassive faces of the politicians of any party. They've been briefed. They know what's going on. Yes, they have to play to their partisan base for this outcome or that outcome. But I think at the end of the day, we do have in Canada a class of people who are educated, who know what's right for Canada, who will bring our country forward. And I really hope that's what happens, because if it doesn't, we will be a resource colony of the United States, which is the track we're on right now, actually.
I also heard from the founder of Wexit Canada, Peter Downing, that right now in the polls in Alberta, separatist sentiment is running at about 40%, which is much better than the number of people who support the NDP.
Yeah, and that's a bad thing. I mean, it's terrible that it's come to this. And I think those who, I hear this line all the time, but we bought you a pipeline. Well, no, you didn't buy anyone a pipeline. What happened in 2015 and 16 was a degree of foolishness to try to broker some sort of deal with the U.S. funded environmentalists as if they were the ones in charge of our destiny. There was a thought amongst influential politicians, decision makers, that they could actually have honorable interactions with these groups. And very quickly, after attempts to make these agreements were made, we were betrayed once again, which is what I predicted, but it's what happened. And as a result of that, we're now clearing the congestion. I think once again, Canadians see that they must be the ones in charge of their destiny. But the big change here, very important change, Jim, very important, is that Indigenous peoples have now more fully, thanks to what's happened in BC with the advent of Bill 41, the DRIPA, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the respect that has been lacking for our Indigenous people in Canada is being restored. It hasn't happened yet, fully to the satisfaction of all, and I think that's legitimate. But it's what's going to ensure that we do have a functioning nation into the future for all.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after the break.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines. Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, what is the number one gold and other mineral exploration capital of the world?
Oh, come on, Jim. You know the answer. It's Vancouver. It's Vancouver. It's so far above all the other ones. Like Toronto is second most. Perth, Australia, Sydney. They have a few. London, England, Calgary, Melbourne, Montreal, Johannesburg. These are big mining centers, right? And put all those other cities together except Vancouver, and they are just barely equal in total to how many junior mining companies, exploration companies we have in Vancouver. So therefore, Vancouver is the world capital of mining exploration, which is something, maybe we should be shouting that from the rooftops, because when you have an industry, Seattle has Boeing and Amazon and what else do they have down there?
Microsoft. Yeah.
People love to talk about that. They're proud of it. Well, all these little companies, yeah, it's true. It's not one giant company. Unfortunately, we've lost some of those. But we've got all these. It's a center of finance, capital, expertise, environmental smarts, regulatory, law, everything. We've got those brains here. I'm actually just, as we talk, I'm standing looking at a vista of downtown Vancouver. I'm down at the Vancouver Convention Center where there's 5,000 people from around the world, mostly Canadians from the north, all across the country, talking about mining exploration this week. It's the Minerals Roundup annual gathering. And this is what drives the economy of BC. I've long thought, isn't it odd? Isn't it a strange thing that the mayor of the city of Vancouver cannot bother himself to come down and, cut the ribbon of the Minerals Roundup course, because it's what drives the Vancouver economy. And why don't they do that? Because it doesn't suit, the messaging of the base, or maybe they didn't get invited or busy, I don't know. But wouldn't it make sense to do that? Because all the hype about, good things like technology, and I'm, up there in the fan club of technology as an industry, and tourism, love it, but nothing touches mineral exploration as an economic driver that puts food in bellies, that sends kids to dance class, hockey school, all the good stuff. That's what drives our economy in Vancouver, and we really should embrace it.
Well, I'm sure the mayor, I don't know if Kennedy Stewart's a big cyclist like former Mayor Robertson, but again, trying to pretend that, we're so green and everything's done by bicycle. I've yet to see any mining activity take place on a bicycle. Even in the old days, they used little ponies, and Shetland ponies probably were used for mining.
Yeah, you're conjuring up a picture there. I can see it, Jim, the miners with the bicycles.
Yes.
It may be coming one day, a long ways away. But in the meantime, hey, look, right now, gold, what is that, $1,500? $1,500? It's rising. And one thing, in 1998, the mining industry will tell you that BC was basically destroyed as a mining jurisdiction. And the typical analysis that you'll hear is that's because of policies by the government of that time. And the same party that was in charge in the 90s is, of course, back in charge. That's the New Democrats. And you might, based on the conventional wisdom about the 90s, you might think, well, that's bad news for mining, I guess, in BC. Well, no, actually, what I've been hearing here, and I've been surprised, is that BC is right up there as the top, or in the top class jurisdictions for mining exploration in the world right now. Another thing I'm hearing, and again, surprised, is that companies are shrinking away from high risk areas, risk to personnel, risk to capital, risk to legal outcomes, and they're coming back to Canada and the U.S. Example, yesterday, a gentleman was telling us about, we're out of Turkey. We're out of West Africa. We're gone. We do not want our people dead. So, where are they going? They're going to Red Lake in Ontario. They're going to Northwest BC, the Golden Triangle as it's called. They're going to central, southern interior BC, and they're loving it. I think it's not just the gold price, because we're talking about copper plays too, and other minerals. It's that we do have a jurisdictional approach right now in BC that is attracting this. So, you got to give credit where it's due, and I think the BC government has earned some credit here. But Great Basin in Nevada is also flagged as one of those places. So those who are following the stocks game, or maybe your listeners are at Roundup and know this themselves, but there's a lot of plays happening, and I'll refer back to my earlier comment on Indigenous participation in the economy. I think that's one of the biggest drivers. It was so moving to listen to the Northwest Territories drummers last night when the leadership of Northwest Territories gathered to say, come and invest. Our people, the Indigenous people of Northwest Territories, where it's majority Indigenous population, want you to come. We want diamond mines. And there was one First Nation, Indigenous group, Dene, I believe, that has got some kimberlites in their territory. Of course, that's where diamonds come from. And they don't know yet what they contain, but there's a lot of excitement there. So just imagine the future of Canada led by these Indigenous groups that are using all the environmental rules, making sure it's done right to create prosperity for their people. Again, it's a little bit back to these pipeline battles. Like, we don't need outside people coming to Canada to stir up fears that are irrational and just plain, irresponsible. We don't need that. And the era of that, I think, is coming to a close because of the amazing work being done by Indigenous people to lead. And I tied that back to the success in BC right now, too, in exploration.
In their own language, what does Dene translate to?
Well, it means copper people. Yeah, copper people or metal people. That's one of the subnames, which tells you something. It tells you that they've known about the mineral richness of Canada's north for a long time.
And of course, the Slavey Beaver people in Peace River used to worship this sandbar that's about 15 kilometers north of the town of Peace River, where natural gas would come up all on its own, and if you threw a burning branch or nowadays a road flare at it, it turns into a huge flame. And they used to run tours to it. So the native people themselves have been celebrating natural resources for a long time.
In Canada and in the Middle East, the Zoroastrian religion, which I don't think is widely practiced, Zoroastrianism, it's a fire worship, and it emerged from worship of these flames that people didn't really understand, of course, the geology, but they knew there were flames there from somewhere out of the ground in Iraq and Iran, and that led to this religion. But it's funny how that works, isn't it? The recognition of these resources. And last week, my group, ResourceWorks, we hosted 600 odd people to talk about the new era of legal fairness that will allow these wrongs of the past to be righted and move forward so everyone wins. The president of the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business was saying, hey, First People of Canada are the first entrepreneurs of Canada, talking about the long-term trading links and how it's not really an alien thing at all for there to be business engagement. And I think that was a message that when you think about it, of course we all know about the fur trade and things like that, yeah. But I think it was a moment to reflect on what that means for today and how we move forward.
We also, a friend of mine on the Musqueam Reserve, Native Carver, said there's oral legends there of trade with the Chinese by the coastal people.
Well, yes, and I think there's been finds of Chinese coins that seem to be rather ancient. There's accounts, Sir Francis Drake, who, some argue, visited here a long time before any other Europeans, was, I think, part of that early connection to Asia. There is some lore and legend in this for sure. It's intriguing. Will we ever know? Well, it's amazing how science marches on. Suddenly they've got some new technique of dating or, examining evidence. You'll never know what we'll find out.
Yes, and for people who want to know about that carver, they can go to his website, jackstogancarvings.wordpress.
How's that spelled, Jack Stogan?
Stogan, S-T-O-G-A-N.
Okay, Jack Stogan.
Yeah.
I'm going to look it up.
And, he works, he carves, does stuff traditionally, carving stuff. And then, he has a gold processing thing that puts 23 karat gold on it. And he was inspired by the Egyptians. He said their artworks 5,000 years later look like they were made yesterday. He doesn't want his wooden carvings to deteriorate over time. And generations from now, people won't know about Jack Stogan and his carvings. He said if you encase them in gold, they'll last forever. So just an interesting little side note there where he's relying on the natural resources of BC for art.
Yep.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after the break.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, the Alberta government set up their $30 million, what they called war room to counter anti-oil propaganda. Was it a big mistake to call it a war room? And also, they said the people working in it classified themselves as journalists. Well, when it's obviously a propaganda office, did they shoot themselves in the foot or both feet by doing that?
Well, I think the biggest mistake going back decades was not to have a government function to inform and educate about the most important part of the Western Canadian economy, indeed the Canadian economy. So governments at all levels have fallen down on the job, and it's only now that we've seen this corrected. Have they done it perfectly? No, I don't think so. I think the war room terminology, which it's not even it was okay to describe in two short words, a 3-letter word and a 4-letter word, war room. People know what that means. But when the Jason Kenney government came into office, I think they should have shifted gears then and said, war room was just a way of describing this bigger idea where we want to, have proper communications, because there's a lot of factual nonsense out there, or non-factual nonsense, I guess I should say. And, you think Statistics Canada, it exists so that, many reasons to help commerce and trade and business and to help governments accurately distribute the resources they need to make sure that the number of swimming pools in Prince George is proportionate to the population and stuff like that. But, there's another function of Stats Canada that is to inform Canadians about the world we live in and how we live and what we should do in future. And that's been absent in the energy space. We've got, the honest truth is, Jim, that the hard, good data about energy systems in Canada, we actually buy those from the Americans because the Americans do it right. It's rather rather embarrassing. Anyways, there needs to be investments. $30 million actually is not factual. It gets repeated over and over by the media. I don't know why it hasn't been corrected. They're spending $30 million on a bunch of things, one of which is this energy information center. They're hiring real journalists. They just hired a gifted young journalist from JW and Energy who follows this stuff, one of the sharpest minds in the business, in my opinion, credible, true journalist to go in there. I think journalists are journalists, they're trained professionals. They have the right to call themselves journalists. And if they work doing one thing or another thing, it's, well, they're plying their trade. So I don't think there's any issue with that I have, certainly, as a journalist myself. And you're a journalist too, Jim. So I do think, though, that it got up some people's nose that the government's approaching a certain way. It might look partisan. The bruises for the partisan people of the election outcome will be something that takes time to heal. But I think as long as they give it a good go at this Canadian Energy Centre or Alberta Energy Centre, work hard, do the right thing, be authentic and accountable, they can do a power of good for Canada, because we have got flows of misinformation. We have these spurious websites that have sprung up with American money for the specific purpose of creating wrong impressions, like not fact-based impressions, among Canadians, among the Canadian public, for the purpose of changing our electoral outcomes. In most other countries where that is so obvious and visible as it is here, because I'm not speculating about this, Jim, it's just fact that we've got this happening. In other countries, it wouldn't be tolerated. But here, hey, we're Canadians. Put up with it. Well, we shouldn't really. And I think one of the things that the Canadian Energy Project can do is make sure that Canadians, to properly enjoy their rights, have access to real information. So that's definitely a step in the right direction, in my opinion.
The reason I said calling it a war room is there's a book you can buy that's called "The First Casualty of War is the Truth." So as soon as you say war, exactly, you think truth has been thrown out the window.
Well, I think there is an information war out there. There is a surge of motivated propaganda coming to us from south of the border, from the environmental groups that are funded by the Americans to undermine confidence in our ways, and it's just wrong. Our systems, our protocols, our regulations and laws are the best in the world. But a lot of Canadians, because of the false information, think otherwise. That's wrong. People don't have to share all my values. I see the world a certain way. I've been around, been a journalist for 40 years. I've seen the inside of a lot of situations that would make your hair curl, frankly. And that's reality, Jim. And the reality is right now that our way of life is being threatened, and those who fail to fight back fail to protect their children's future.
Stewart, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our very popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.